Hello friends, welcome to Flosstube and Variety Show number 53. I'm Emily Williams in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and this is Friday, July 29th, I believe, 2022. Thanks so much for joining me. And I continue to have a few new subscribers, and I really appreciate that. Thanks for subscribing. If you're watching this video and you decide, having watched it, that you might like to see more, I do recommend you subscribe and click the notifications bell, because though I have been fairly regular, although other than the vacation week, at posting on Fridays, I'm not always that regular, and I can foresee in the month of August possibly being a little irregular. And if you have subscribed and clicked the notifications bell, then you'll be notified when I post a video, in case that matters to you, which I don't mean to suggest that it should. So anyway, I'm glad you're here today, regardless of whatever happens in the future. This is Flosstube, meaning it's about cross stitch, and it's a variety show, meaning it's about other things. So we'll find out in a bit what that turns out to be. So let's start with cross stitch. I'm going to start and show you the tiny bit of progress I've made on Eliza Stringer, age 6, which is the special project by Hands Across the Sea for the people who are participating in the Great British Sampler Weekend next fall, as in fall of 2023. And as I said a few times, I'm going to that with a friend of mine, a childhood friend, and looking forward to that. I didn't iron this or flatten it out, but what you can see here, that heart is not part of the sampler, that's my needle minder, but I have completed the border and it matches up, which is nice. I believed that it would, but I haven't stitched on fine count linen before. This is 46 count linen. Can't remember who the manufacturer is, what the color is, but 46 count is pretty small, And I was a little concerned because it's so small that even with my super magnifier, I have trouble seeing the thread that's, how exactly the weave of it. I can see the holes pretty well, but to see which thread is on top of which thread and make sure that I'm stitching where I want to be stitching. But apparently I didn't make any mistakes, or let's put it this way, I made an even number of mistakes. If you count 0 as being an even number, then I might have made 0 mistakes, but made it all the way around. This little border appears all the way around, and I think I probably will not discipline myself to do that border all the way around. I'll do some of the side, and then I will start some of that alphabet on the top, because that will be fun. And because I want to get some of my other colors going, and I expect to use some of those other colors not in the border. So I worked just a little on that, but I'm still enjoying it, which is good. This is called Sampler, I'm sorry, it's upside down. Not that it matters because it's symmetrical. Sampler number 193 by 2x2 Stitch Designer, which is an Etsy shop. 2x2 Stitch Art. I eventually will know what this is. In fact, I should cheat and write the name of it on the back of this piece of paper. Then you'll think I've memorized it. But 2x2 Stitch Art is a Ukrainian designer on Etsy, and she has many things like this. Very lovely. And I have continued to stitch on this. This is a great thing to do when you're watching something on TV or on YouTube that you want to kind of pay attention to, but it isn't vital that every single word be there. And I didn't take it out of the hoop, but I'm making progress. I'm working my way toward the top. I forgot to mention last week when I talked about our trip to the Pacific Northwest, talk about this, which is, I'm using it as a needle minder, but it's actually just a magnet, and it's made in the likeness of a U.S. Geological Survey marker, which apparently appears at the top of Mount Baker. We did not go to the top of Mount Baker, but I bought this at the gift shop at Artist's Point there in Washington State. So that's handy needle minder. It's pewter, I believe, and it has a magnet. It already came with a magnet because it's supposed to be stuck to your fridge. So I just used an additional magnet. Now it's been a while since I have shown you the purple sampler, so I'm rolling up the bottom because I want to show you the new thing, but I'll just remind you this is what it is. I'm making this for a friend of mine, and I had shown you before the loon and the canoe paddles and the moose, and the new thing in there, in addition to a couple of borders, is that little guy carrying a canoe. And if I had stitched, so some of you may know that that's a specific symbol. That is the symbol of the portage sign. And if I had stitched the border around it, there's usually a black line that goes around that. And sometimes it's printed on a piece of yellow or orange cardstock that's nailed to a tree at the start of the portage. And it might tell the length of the portage in meters or kilometers. Because I assume that maybe they use that same symbol other than in Canada, but I've only ever seen it in Canada, so I'm used to seeing it in meters or kilometers. I'll show it again. And I've also added those two borders underneath. I was gonna just go straight to that guy and be able to tell you the story that I want to tell that goes along with that, except that I didn't want to count all the way over there to place it, and so I decided I better do a border. So I chose that little S border, and the little rabbits will be a border going all the way across. And that, I'm using this SS009 sampler decorative borders by Happy Mood Point, which is another Ukrainian Etsy shop. And I picked that rabbit border off of over here. And I think that S border, yeah, the S border is over on this side. So anyway, that's what I have been working on. I shouldn't say I've been working on it tons. I picked it up again this week. So my plans to continue this are that I'm going to put some other things in this white space in here. Some of it I know what I'm going to put, and some of it I'll discover it when I put it. But so far this is from the top of the stitching to the bottom of the rabbit border. It's about 16 inches right now, and the eventual length will be between 24 and 30 inches depending on what occurs to me, what I decide to do. And I'll tell you a story after a bit about portaging. And that's all I wanted to show you about cross stitch today. Well, I wanted to show you more about cross stitch, but I don't have any more to show because that's all I've worked on this past week. And you know, I was watching Stitchin' Mommy. Yeah, I don't know. She must have more time to stitch than I do. I was also watching another person called, YouTube channel called Sarah's Stitching Spot, which she's new to YouTube, and she's just done her second video. She's an eclectic stitcher also. She does, you know, wide variety of types of projects. These people who have dozens of projects underway, I don't get it. I don't think I want to try that. I mean, I've thought to myself, oh, I should start a few more. And I'm sure that I will start a few more, but hopefully I'll wait. I mean, my plan is, I don't mean hopefully as if it would be a character flaw to not do it this way, but my plan would be to finish or nearly finish at least a couple of these before starting a new project of any size. So Eliza Stringer, age 6, has a pretty good chance of, well, I was going to say of being a quick stitch. It would be, except that I have to say I'm finding it a little challenging to stitch on linen. So it's taking me, and frankly, to stitch with silk. I love the smoothness of the silk, but I'm using 100.3 silk by Au Ver A Soie for that. So many of you passed or gave me your best wishes for our 40th wedding anniversary, which we celebrated this past weekend with a little dinner party, and I wanted to show you a couple of vintage photos. My husband and me there in the middle, and his parents next to him, and my parents next to me. All of those parents are gone, but Byron and I are still here. And my mother made my dress and her dress. So if you do the math, we were married in 1982. Somebody asked me, was it my choice to wear the hat, or was I told to wear the hat, thinking that my mother insisted? I think it was my choice. I'm pretty sure it was. I like hats. I think I look good in hats. But we were married at the First Baptist Church in the little town. And here's another photo. This is our wedding party. Next to my husband are two of his brothers. He has another full brother and then some step siblings. And then my brother is on the end. And on my side are two of my friends. The gal in yellow is a college friend, and the gal in pale green, if you can tell that that's the color, is the friend that I'm going to England with next year for the Great British Sampler. And she has not changed. I mean, it is absolutely true. She has not changed. The rest of us, well, I don't know. My husband's side of the family hasn't changed that much. It's mostly me. I've changed. But we had a very fun time. The food was good. But you know, forgot to take some pictures, so we have to get some pictures soon of my husband and me to commemorate that occasion. And I had said absolutely no gifts, and despite that admonition, my son and daughter-in-law brought us a bottle of wine, which we served with the meal. I mean, there is a kind of wine that goes with ribs, and this type that they brought was quite good with ribs. And another friend brought us a bouquet of flowers, which she said, well, that's not a present, it's just flowers. So thank you very much. And they are gorgeous. I'll put a picture in, actually, because they're spectacular. So that is what we did this past weekend. And now I want to talk to you about that portage sign. I've mentioned before that we like to go camping and canoeing in Canada at Algonquin Provincial Park, which is in Ontario. And in fact, in my adult life, that's the only place I've been camping. Well, that's not true. I did go camping once, I think, soon after my husband and I got married. So I guess we were adults, even though, you know, I'm going back to our wedding anniversary. I might have said this last week because it's what I say about it. The idea that we've been married 40 years is preposterous. I mean, that is a preposterous number, particularly since we're only 49 years old, right? Right? Yes. Anyway, back to camping. We have been camping several times up there, my family with our friend Anne, and this is the person for whom I'm making the purple sampler. And we have another close friend family that has joined us up there, the Clarks, Cindy and Brent, whom we lost tragically last year, and their kids, Emma and Benjamin. Cindy is my quilting buddy. And this particular year, it was probably maybe 17 years ago, something like that, 16, 17 years ago. I'm basing it on the fact that our son was maybe 12 and Benjamin Clark was probably 16 or almost 16, something like that. The two sons of the family, in other words, the two male children who went along, Emma being the female child of the Clarks who went along. And we decided this particular time that instead of sticking to our little Pog Lake and things that we could reach directly by canoe, by water there, that we were going to go to another location and canoe down a little meandering river. And so we loaded up 2 cars. It must have been 2 cars because we had a lot of vessels. We had 2 canoes and 3 kayaks. So I think we took 2 cars to the drop-off point, to the put-in point, and which was near Tea Lake and near Tea Lake Dam. And then we had 2 adults in each of the 2 canoes. So Brent and Cindy were in one canoe, and I was in the other canoe with either Byron or Ann. And then either Byron or Ann took turns shuttling the vehicle, one of the vehicles, along the route, and stopped every kilometer or 2 so that they could trade, so that they could each have a chance to be part of the canoeing part, and the other one would drive the car for that little stretch of the canoe. And this was a stretch where Byron and I, my husband and I, were in the canoe, and Ann was driving. So she unfortunately did not actually see all this transpire. And each of the kids had his own kayak, Benjamin and Scott, our son Scott, and Emma. They each had a kayak. Now, if you've ever been on a river in Canada, in this area of Canada, they're little pretty rivers. They're narrow. This was a narrowish river. It does a little meander. There's water lilies and grasses and that kind of thing along the edges, and reeds maybe, alder, a lot of alder, low brushy growth in this part of Canada along these rivers, and a lot of meandering, a lot of turning around. And because Algonquin Park is, the waterway system in there is largely controlled, the levels are controlled by dams, which is a legacy largely of the logging industry that took place in there, a century ago or so. There's usually the right amount of water in these rivers, so it's not too rushing and it's not dry. And so there's water, and normally you can make your way along these little rivers in a canoe or a kayak. Well, a kayak draws about 2 inches and a canoe draws about 5 inches, sort of appropriately loaded canoe and kayak. So the kids could get places in their kayaks that we in our canoes couldn't go. And there was it was a really lovely day, not hot, not cold, a reasonable amount of sunshine. It was kind of the perfect day. And so we set out and we made one trade. I think probably my husband drove the first stretch and Ann was in the canoe with me, and then we made a trade and he was in the canoe. And we went along and we came to this section on the map that was marked with a little R, and that means rapids. And in the lowest water, as I say, it was controlled, so usually there's a similar amount of water year-round in there. At the lowest water, which would be late in August, perhaps, you would probably definitely have to portage around that, especially if you're in a canoe with 2 people in it, so you're going to have the sort of the maximum depth. Your boat is going to stick down the most. In a kayak, you might not have to. And in the high water, in the earlier part of the year, when there would be possibly higher water, you would definitely be able to go right through it in any kind of vessel, though it might be kind of fast. Well, this was early, probably late July or early August. That's usually when we went camping. And the kayakers were in the lead, and they just were going along zip-zop, and they just shot ahead on this little rapids area. And I didn't really think about that we should stop. We in the canoe should stop, my husband and I. So we just started out. Well, we didn't know what we were doing. The water was a little too low for us, for our canoe, and we got stuck. Now, we were not stuck in the middle of the river. Perhaps if we'd gone in the middle, we might have been better off, but we were a little bit toward one side more than the other, and I apparently, as the story is told, and I will say that Brent told the story the best, and I wish that I could hear him tell it again, because he's much better. He was much better at telling stories. And as Cindy said, he possibly would have added in a few things that may or may not have been true. But anyway, I apparently called out for some assistance, shall we say, and the canoe was tipping, and I do not like to get wet when I don't plan to. We call it unintended wetness. I do not like unintended wetness. And the canoe was a little slanted because it was caught on a rock, and Benjamin, the almost 16-year-old, or maybe he was 16, stopped. He got his kayak over to the side and pulled it up on the bank, and then he waded back to help us. And he helped steady the canoe so that I could step out, and the rock was slippery, so he let me hang on to him while I made my way to the shore. And then we sort of got the canoe straightened out, and we're getting ready to go back down it. And I saw that my son, who was not experienced as a kayaker at all, was in the middle of the river walking upstream, pulling his kayak. And I said, Benjamin, thanks so much for helping us. Now, if you wouldn't mind, would you go and find out what in the world Scott thinks he's doing walking upstream with his kayak, and what's wrong? And I also think that you should now swoop around the end and make sure Emma's all right, because she had gone on ahead and had not reappeared around the corner. So he did all that, and everything was fine, and we got back on the water and continued on our way. But in the meantime, Brent and Cindy had stopped at the head of the rapids to sort of watch this unfold. They did not come down at the same time we did. And apparently, as I learned later, once they saw that we weren't really going to capsize in the middle of the river, they were laughing and trying not to laugh loudly enough for me especially to hear them. And when finally we were all reunited after this rapids, and we'd met up with Anne and told her the story, Cindy said to me, so Emily, the next time you see a portage sign, are you going to take it? And of course we should have, shouldn't we? We should have taken it, or at least I should have taken the portage. Now, they made it through in their canoe just fine, so I don't know what we did wrong. We went in the wrong, our exact path along that little rapids was not correct, I guess. But that was the story, and that's why I put the portage symbol on this sampler, because it reminds me of that story, and I think it will remind my friend Anne of that story as well, along with all the other canoeing we did, because Algonquin Park is rich in canoe trails, pathways, rivers, and trips. In fact, there's an entire map. Let's see, I think I got it out. I wonder if I have it here. Yes. Canoe routes of Algonquin Provincial Park. And this is a big map. It shows the canoe routes that are near the campgrounds, as well as all over the park. And it's quite a large park. Very large park. I mean, I'm not going to unfold the whole map, but there are a lot of lakes and a lot of routes, and there's a lot of interior routes, interior meaning not reachable directly by road, where you would put in somewhere and canoe and camp, and canoe and camp, canoe and camp. And Anne and some of her friends some years ago did that type of trip. And she and I, a few years ago, talked about doing that, a few meaning more than 10. And we thought that we would be willing to do that, but we would want to hire Benjamin Clark as our guide, because, not guide, not really guide, but as our lackey, our toter, so that when we came to the places that we had to portage, he could carry some of our stuff. And, you know, we would give him an all expenses paid trip to Algonquin Park if he would just help us out, and rent him a kayak, because kayak is very easy for one person to maneuver, and it's lightweight for portaging. And that if we were, so normal interior camping, you have to be somewhat circumspect in what you carry, because you have to carry it, physically tote it around on the portages, along with your canoe. That is not in the canoe. You would have to take 2 trips, probably. But if we had help, we could carry a little more and make sure that we had what we wanted to be comfortable, like an actual sleeping pad and things like that. But anyway, the camping days are probably in our past now. I still have a tent. It's a very nice Sleeps 6 Eureka tent. And up in Canada, we have a kitchen tent, as we call it. It's just screened tent with, it's not just screens, it actually has sides that roll down so you can enclose it in case of wind or rain. And it has a nice canopy out the front of it. And so you can cook in it, or you can eat in it, and you can play games in it if it's rainy. You know, it's big enough. It's 12 by 12, I think, and so we'll cover the entire picnic table. And we still have that. That is something that we could possibly use even if we weren't going to camp, if we were just going to have a picnic at some point. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think Anne has kept her tent. But those are great fun, great days. Canoeing may also be in my past just because of the getting into and out of the canoe part, but maybe I can, I don't know, miraculously get younger the way I looked in our wedding photos. So that is sort of the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. A preview of coming attractions. Of several videos ago, I showed you a little clip of my friend Cindy and me and doing a video, kind of silly. And we're going to do a video. We're going to hopefully record something this weekend, maybe. And depending on what it turns out to be, I may include it with next week's Flosstube and Variety Show, or I may make it a standalone video. And we'll just see. We'll see how that goes. She and I, other than that a couple of silliness opportunities, we have not actually made a video together, but we originally had thought we would have a channel also that would be about our quilting and our quilting business, long arm quilting. So possibly you'll see that next week, or maybe you'll see it after next week, but you can tell me once you see it. You don't have to tell me in advance how much you love it, because you won't know if you love it. But once you see it, you can tell me whether you like it, whether it's enjoyable, whether you know maybe people who aren't into cross stitch that would be interested in watching the quilting video if it came out every month or so, a couple of weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks, or every month. That's sort of my thought. And I'm still working on that commission quilt. That's all, I guess. It's pretty much, really, that's about all I've done. The small amount of cross stitch that you have seen today, and that commission quilt. And I think that's all I wanted to talk about, let's be sure. Yes, that's all I had in my notes for today. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for joining me. And I hope you have a great week stitching or canoeing. I do recommend you consider carefully whether you should take that portage or not. And many blessings to you, friends.